Hey now, going to do a quick video on my video settings. A lot of people have been asking, what are your video settings?
Video settings? Do a video on your video settings.
So I've been using a lot of text to explain it, but it doesn't seem to be good enough. So I'm putting a quick video together showing you exactly what's what. So here's the trailer as I was producing it. If I scrub through the timeline, you can see this is the trailer. Currently it's rendering quite a few different layers. But basically, if I play here, you can see that's how the video was recorded in the game. So what I've done is I've made an adjustment layer over top of the whole video. It's a much better way of doing things instead of doing each individual piece of footage that you have. The adjustment layer, if you look on the left, I have, let's go for this. I have my fast blur, which is basically just used a few times throughout transitioning. So when the video first starts, things are blurred and then it comes clear. Then I have my RSMB. Forget what RSMB stands for, aside from RS motion blur. It's about $100 to buy it, but what it does is GPU accelerated motion blur, which in Premiere and After Effects is a godsend. You go from doing 1 frame per 30 seconds to 30 frames a second. Huge workflow enhancement, and is definitely worth $100. And then Lumetri Color, which is now part of Premiere. This is Premiere CC 2019. I think Lumetri's been around for a few years though. And this gives me all the basic color correction and curves. So if you look at the frame, let's go here. What I'm going to do is turn on the adjustment layer, and you'll watch. This is what it looked like in the game. And with the adjustment layer on, boom, that's how it goes. The Lumetri adds the vignette on the cornering. That's the darkening. It adds the contrast and saturation. So I have the saturation pumped down a little bit, but the vibrance pumped up. And then the motion blur from the RSMB. So if I say turn off, so here, I'll just do this. Here's Lumetri. This is the difference between the Lumetri color treatment. Not significant, but enough to give it its own tone, the tone that I'm going for. And then the motion blur. And the way the motion blur works is it goes frame by frame. It looks at this frame and the next frame, and then blurs the two frames together based on their speed of motion. So if the pixel's on the bottom left of the grass, I really don't know if my mouse is being picked up or not. So I'll just go by the description. On the bottom left, you can see the blades of grass. With the blur off, they're not blurred. So you go to the next frame, which you see it's not blurred. But what it'll do is it'll take it'll look at the pixels that are there. So let's say the highlights of the grass, and then look at the pixels that have moved. And based on the speed that they've moved, which is interpolated frame by frame, it will add an appropriate blur that I've set up in the settings to being motion sensitivity of 72 and blur amount of 50. 50 represents, 0.50 represents your typical shutter speed for 30 frames per second, which is another thing on the video. I set my videos up for 30 frames a second. You can do 60 frames a second. Trouble with 60 frames a second is it doesn't look cinematic. It looks fantastic. When you see 60 frames a second in games, it looks great. But it gives you that soap opera look when you have TV shows or movies. A lot of people don't like it. I definitely don't. It makes things look fake. But because the video game's fake, 60 frames per second looks good. And now that YouTube has 60 frames a second, a lot of people are doing it. Because this is a cinematic, and I enjoy cinematics. Most of my videos are always done at 30 frames a second. And the shutter speed of 0.5 is the realistic shutter speed of a 30 frames per second video camera. So, motion blur off, motion blur on, off, on. You can see that's a video game. That's more cinematic. Video game, cinematic, video game, cinematic. So when you play it, you get that look. The issue with RSMB and pretty much all pixel motion blur software is that it can only interpolate from frame A to frame B. So if you look here, let's go here. You see the grass between the transport truck itself and the trailer? If you go 1 frame behind, there's not enough data for it to figure out how the pixels were blurred. And so it kind of just, it must have been sort of like this. And so you get that really wonky waviness. And that's just the way it's got to be. There's really no way around that unless it's recorded in slow motion in the game. So let's say I recorded this at 4, 8, or 16 times slower, then I would have more frames captured that the RSMB could interpolate and blur. And then I would just pump up the amount of blur so that when played back at normal speed, the blur still appears realistic. So basically, all I do on my videos is record in game. Doesn't matter if I'm getting 40 frames or 150 frames. I set recording for 1080p, 30 frames a second. I don't do 4K because my internet doesn't allow me to upload 4K. I mean, it allows me to, but it takes me an hour to upload 100 megabytes right now. So basically 1080p, 30 frames a second. I drop it into Premiere. I add some Lumetri Color correction, which comes with Premiere, and then RSMB. Again, it's only $100, and for making a bunch of videos and for other projects, it's more than worth it for me. And the fast blur is just part of this specific video. RSMB, you don't have to use it. Premiere does have its own pixel motion. I think it's called pixel motion blur. If I say pixel motion, it doesn't. Motion pixel? What is it? Just pixel blur? Why isn't this working? Video effects. What's going on here? Doesn't seem like it's in Premiere anymore. It used to be. Is it obsolete now? Well, either way, there's something to do with pixel motion blur. Maybe it's something that you download from Adobe. Regardless, that's my video. It takes video going from this to this. And that's that. Look at that beautiful little Viper. Guess what I'm in the process of buying myself right now? A 94 Dodge Viper. This isn't a 94. I've learned as a Gen 3 or Gen 4 Viper. Anyway, there's the difference. Motion blur, huge. If you watch it on the background, it's huge for giving a sense of depth and speed. So watch the background. And now watch the background again, but without motion blur. There's far too much detail. If anything, you can pull your eye away from the main focus. So again, the main focus is these cars. Nothing else matters, and so it's blurred out. That's that. Pretty long video, I assume. Maybe I can upload this quicker than a few hours. And I suggest that you have been watching it. Actually, I'll put this at the beginning. I'm going to cut this part out. Nobody's going to hear this. Nobody's going to know that I'm talking. Maybe I'll leave it in because I'm too lazy. We'll see. That's it. That's the video settings. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, of course, ask. I'm more than happy to respond. I usually take all the time required. If not, when I wake up in bed, I have a tough time not checking my phone. So I'll definitely respond in the waking moments of my day. And thanks for all the positive comments, guys. You guys have rocked my world with all the positivity and encouragement. It is just absolutely unbelievable. Nothing at all that I expected. I thought a lot of people are going to say, oh, wow, neat video. It's a copy of this, or, oh, wow, you just copied that. Doesn't seem to be the case at all. Pretty solid community. Cheers to that.